Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Body broadcast. Austin and Marty here, and today we are going to talk about lab work, better known as blood work. Though I tend to use the term, I don't know about you, I tend to use the term lab work just because there are sometimes you got to pee in a cup for lab work too, so that's
Yeah.
technically not blood work.
Yep, sure. Well, especially with things coming out now like the Dutch test and everything else, right? That it's just lab work sounds cooler too. Sounds smarter. So let's do it. Yeah.
Yep. We're going to do, it's probably going to be broken down into two episodes, most likely. We have like five major categories, and there'll be some subsections of them. But today we're going to cover, not going to go into hormones as much today. Today we're going to cover what you would call your CBC, which is your complete blood count, your CMP, your complete metabolic panel, and then just some values related to cardiovascular health as well. So this will cover things like cardiovascular. It'll cover blood markers in terms of like your blood cells, your white blood cells, red blood cells, the composition of those. It'll cover electrolytes, organs in terms of like your liver, kidneys, and so on and so forth. So that's mainly what we're going to get into today. And then we're going to try to make this as relatable as possible to competitors too. I mean, obviously Marty and I are pretty adamant about overall health, but I mean, there's going to be some things that are a little more relevant to us than your normal crowd getting their lab work done.
Right. Absolutely. And it's I like that we even talked about this a little bit before we started recording here, is that this is relevant to almost everybody regardless. Sure, being a competitor is going to have a little bit more of a skewed, we'll say, lab panel than most, regardless if you choose to be enhanced or not enhanced. But it's there's too many things out there that are we'll call them silent markers of bad health. Such as, obviously everyone knows that, hopefully everyone knows that blood pressure is one of them. That's just, it's not monitored enough, and it could be something as simple as your insulin resistance is way off. These are things that could be detrimental to not only muscle gain, but to fat loss, but also just general health. Like, you could be suffering extreme fatigue, and it could be something so easily able to catch on your lab work, and hopefully we're going to be able to help you determine when you should even go for your lab work and things along those lines to ensure that you're going to have the most successful, we'll say, fitness career, whether it's on or off the stage.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you seen somebody that looks really good but is, I mean, obviously internally they're extremely unhealthy. Yeah, I mean
it's way too damn prevalent. Like of course, here's one of my fabulous analogies: is that it's like when you see someone with a really slick looking car, and then they pop the hood and it's just disgusting. Like, nothing is clean. Maybe there's no oil in it. Maybe nothing's been serviced. Maybe the brake pads are going. It just because something looks fabulous does not mean it's running. It doesn't even necessarily mean it's running. Like, it could just be pictures of the car in the garage. Like, can it start? So that's just a really good analogy to see that, yeah, you can cosmetically look great, but the person could be figuratively and literally dying slowly or quickly just due to not knowing what markers to check.
Yeah, and there's a couple things worth mentioning there. Like, people can get away. The body's pretty resilient. Like, you can get away with beating yourself up for a while, but it's eventually going to catch up with you. So those people that we're talking about now, that internally they're just battling a lot of inflammation, stress, and they have a lot of markers that are off, but they look pretty good. It might not always be that way. It's eventually, yeah, right. It's eventually going to catch you. And then on the same token, something we talked about before the show is, in the short term, if you see something that's off on blood work, it's not necessarily a reason to automatically freak out, because we're always going through all kinds of stressors, whether it's in the gym, whether we're prepping for a show, whether it's just anything in life in general. So and there's a ton of markers on blood work that can be skewed very easily by like stress and inflammation, for example. They can something as simple as your white blood cells, which is one of the top ones that we're going to talk about on the CBC.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, if you're sick, if you have an infection, if you have chronic inflammation, anything like that, you might have the white blood cells skewed. Well, if you're a little sick and you just beat yourself up in the gym yesterday and you go get lab work, your white blood cells might be really elevated. That doesn't mean you have cancer. It just means,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just, the lab work is really good, but it's also like a breeding ground for hypochondriacs.
Oh, and man. Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
It's like, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to balance the two. It really, really is. And trust me, I'm guilty of it too. It's like the more you know, the more prone you are to overanalyzing, because yeah, you can really dig into lab work. So I think my point is, like, you need to know
enough, we'll say. Yeah.
You need to know enough, and you also, sometimes you might want to retest things just for peace of mind, and it's also good to kind of know how things tie into one another and not just look at lab work like as a singular marker. Unfortunately, like, even doctors do that. It's something as simple as, probably the most common one that we see is something like liver enzymes.
Right.
They are, most of the people listening to this know that your liver enzymes are elevated through, weight training, through your resistance exercise. And there's actually studies, like, you can go right on PubMed, and there's studies that tell us that. And yet you go in, your liver enzymes are elevated, they want to send you to the emergency room because they think you're going into liver failure, which is, or they think you have, hepatitis or something.
Yeah.
They want to do ultrasounds on your liver. Well, really, you just did a 30 set leg workout the night before, and your liver enzymes are quadruple. Well, I mean, yeah, duh. That's what's going to happen. So,
it's like in fasting, like, just if let's say you screwed up and you had a coffee, anything like that can throw it so far off. And then maybe too, we can even give a couple guidelines like that too to be aware of. Like, that's perfect. I don't think enough people know that if you did that, really, we'll say that the 30 set leg day, that's perfect. And then the next day they go in, that it's not common knowledge enough, let alone, like you said, that some of the physicians, and I'm not going to go into the doc bashing thing. I've been on both sides of that, in terms of, like, oh, if they're an idiot if they don't know this stuff, because they don't necessarily know. So I think it needs to be a kind of a hybrid between the athlete or the fitness enthusiast, we'll call it, knowing themselves about what they've done and being able to inform them of that, but then also the doctors too being able to ask the more prevalent questions.
Yeah. So with that said, like, just off the rip, if you want to get lab work done, what are some things you need to know about when or how, I guess, to do it? There are some markers that require being fasted.
Yep.
Typically it's going to tell you, like, if you have a requisition form or something, whatever they give you, if the doctor gives it to you, if you're ordering your lab work, depending on where you're, what country you're in, it's probably going to say on there, if you are questioning it, being fasted is normally a good policy, just to make sure that you're not messing anything up. Now, with that said, there's a lot of markers that they don't require being fasted at all. Something like blood glucose or lipids perhaps might require fasting insulin levels. It's argued whether the lipid panel really requires it or not, but it's, my point is being, just if you're questioning it, make sure you're fasted. Now, another thing I posted about too is make sure that you are hydrated for your lab work.
Oh God, yes. Yep.
Right. Well, as you can see, being fasted and being hydrated is probably not the easiest thing in the world. Why? Because it normally means you're getting labs done in the morning. So I don't have, like, when I posted that too, a lot of people ask me, well, how much water should I drink before I go in? I'm like, honestly, I don't know that there is a perfect amount. I just try to get, like, I'll get up, I'll literally have, standard size, like the spring water or whatever, bottle, 16 ounces, give or take, take it down. I'll try to have three or four of those if I can before I go in and have labs done, which is a pretty good amount. It's going to be 32. I mean, 4 of them's, that's 64 ounces. That's about a half a gallon.
Yeah.
So
that's a little excessive, right? And I don't mean to cut you off too much, but it's consistency, right? Like, especially if I call it like a LabWork journal or a LabWork portfolio, is that if you start playing around with that too much, like even something that you might not think is as detrimental, but like if you're having, we'll say the 1 bottle of water before one of your blood work, or so one of your lab works, and then 3 bottles before, that can potentially throw things off. So the more that you can keep that damn consistency there, that will ensure that, or do something to help ensure that you're going to get as consistent a levels as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, probably another one would be training. Now,
yep.
I normally just suggest that you do try, if possible, if your schedule allows, do lab work a day after a non-training day. Mm-hmm. So if you're getting lab work done in the morning, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever. If you didn't train the previous day, try to get it done that next day. It's a good policy, just because that inflammation is going to throw off a lot of the markers. And while that inflammation is not permanent from weight training, obviously, it's not like a chronic inflammation, it still just makes it hard to read certain things. So if you can get it, go the day after. Ideally, it would be even longer. Like, talking about the liver enzymes, for example. So a lot of the literature would say like 48 hours or even more, which that's just really not even realistic for most of us. Mm-hmm. We're not like, you could. I mean, suppose if you were only getting lab work done periodically and you want to take 3 days off training and then have it done, but most people aren't going to do that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I'm trying to be practical with you guys and not.
That's right.
I know what people do. Yeah. So those are a few things you can do before you go in, just to make sure that your values are going to be relatively accurate. But yeah, we can dig into some of these numbers.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Yeah. So normally on LabWork, the very first one that you're going to see at the top is the CBC. Typically, I believe that's that's normally the top section. At least the LabWork that I get, that's normally the top section of the chart. Mm-hmm. So CBCs are essentially your blood counts. That'll be, for you guys that have had lab work done, like that's where you'll see your hemoglobin and hematocrit, white blood cells, and things of that nature. So that's typically what you're going to see at the top. Now, this one there's not a ton to go over on here. I mean, there is and there isn't. There's a lot of small values on here. Now, you're going to see your white blood cells normally at the top. And the blood cell counts get confusing because they're broken down into a lot of smaller cells. You'll have your cells will be broken down into like your monocytes, your lymphocytes, your granulocytes, your neutrophils, basophils, eosinophils. So, I mean, do you need to know all those? Probably not, just because a lot of that stuff's going to be basically, if you have like a white blood cell count that's pretty skewed, chances are one of those other blood cell counts is probably going to be skewed.
Right.
That's good. That's like usually what's going to happen. Now, normally they're interconnected. So now, again, this is one of those markers where it's going to be an acute situation where if you are sick, or if you have a lot of inflammation, or if you're really stressed, or if you're taking some kind of prescription medication, like something that's going to be overly stressful on your body, like for example, maybe antibiotics or corticosteroids. So what's a common corticosteroid here is it's freaking blanking my mind. What is it? I'm sure you got prednisone.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. I'm sure you guys have prednisone. I'm sure they probably prescribe it there too.
Absolutely. So,
yep. Yeah. So anything like that's going to cause some kind of immune response is going to throw off a lot of these markers. So again, it's not something to freak out about. If you're seeing massive elevations and you're symptomatic of other things outside of just like having a cold, then yeah, you might want to follow up, because there are some potential things that could be pretty serious, like more serious diseases, leukemia, cancers, HIV, AIDS, shit like that. I mean, that's obviously really serious. Now, you're most likely gonna know if there's something else. Like, you're gonna feel symptomatic of something. So again, don't freak out if your white blood cells move around a little bit. It might be worth retesting. But the ranges on a lot of these blood cell counts are really, really big, and that's for a reason.
Right.
That's because for people that really do have some kind of immune issue, like they have some kind of autoimmune disease, or they have like leukemia, for example, I mentioned that, you're not going to be, if you're 2 points out of range, you probably don't have leukemia.
Right.
That's my,
Yeah.
I'm not saying, and I'm not a doctor, like, disclaimer, Marty and I aren't doctors. So if you are concerned, obviously just follow up with your doc, and they can, they can test you for whatever you want, I'm sure.
Yep.
So,
especially for most of the clients here in Canada, like, if there is a concern, people just, like, if you do have that hypochondriac tendency, go get the damn test. Like, especially because then the stress levels can rise, which will throw other things off if you don't. So therefore, get it done.
Yeah, because you guys have, your healthcare is a little bit different even. So,
yes.
If that stuff's really readily available, then it's not going to hurt to go in and get it checked. But just in summation, I guess, of the white blood cells, I don't see this as an issue with most people. The only times I'll see it, typically, a couple major things: either A, they're sick, or B, they're overtrained or overreached.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will see it in people that are overreached, that don't have, like, they don't think that they have a cold or a virus or anything, but they just feel generally run down. You will see in a lot of those people that need to back it off, you will see some white blood cell counts being skewed there as well. So I know, like me, for example, when I had all those adrenal issues, my white blood cell count was really, really low.
Mm-hmm.
Because my immune system had probably been beaten to death.
Right.
Essentially.
Yep.
So again, kind of try to connect the dots there when you're looking at it. Going on to red blood cells, a couple of things there. You'll have your red blood cell count. Normally, you're going to look at the three main ones that you're probably going to look at together will be your red blood cell count, your hemoglobin, your hematocrit. That's just for us as bodybuilders, or even just a general person that might have issues with something like, you mentioned high blood pressure, which is a really good one. Well, these, somebody might have elevated hemoglobin, hematocrit. Your blood viscosity is too high. Your blood's thick.
Right.
So that is an issue. You don't want to be walking around with thick blood that's moving through your veins and arteries like sludge. You're at risk for not only, internal organ issues, but things like stroke, for example.
Right,
so
right.
You don't want to be stroking out.
Yeah, I've heard that's bad. Yes, that's right.
Yes. Hemoglobin, hematocrit, definitely ones to keep eyes on. Those are ones that I notice a lot of people have problems with too. So if you are somebody that has problems with those, normally some people will give blood. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that.
Yep.
Now, the blood thing's I've changed my views on it a little bit.
Okay.
Over the years, because it does work. Like, it does work to lower them. But what I've seen and what I've read and what I understand is, in some people, your body will actually end up reproducing red blood cells much quicker than you're getting rid of them, and you might end up worse off than when you started.
Okay.
So,
wow, I didn't know that. That's good info. Okay.
Yeah, and you know what? And I never thought about it either, because it never happened to me.
Right.
And none of the clients I had that donated blood, they were all fine, and they stayed pretty level, so I didn't really think much of it. But I started thinking about it a lot, and actually my doctor brought it up to me. He's like, yeah, and some people, they regenerate those blood cells so quickly that it's like a rebound. You know what I mean? Like a,
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah. So it's something that you can definitely try if you want to donate blood. It's free here in the U.S. I'm sure you guys probably have blood donation service.
Of course. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, anything like that, you can definitely try it. Some people, if you do donate blood pretty regularly and you're still high, try skipping one and see, keep an eye on it, check it like once a month for a couple months and see what happens to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you could actually be making it worse. So that's just something to think about.
But either way, do you believe that the donating blood is almost like a Band-Aid solution? It's not really solving a lot of the long-term problems. It's just kind of, do you understand what I'm asking there? Is like there's better ways around it other than just donating of blood to make sure that your hematocrit and your hemoglobin are in check.
Yeah, you're right. And it can be, well, it's normally something you're doing. Like in bodybuilding, the biggest thing is people that use, PEDs. A lot of them are going to increase red blood cells, and that's going to inevitably raise your hemoglobin and hematocrit. So,
right.
Well, the best option there is to take breaks periodically, like most people do, or lower the amounts, or stop whatever you need to do. But again, this is one of those things too that you are taking a calculated risk. You might, if you do choose to partake, then you might have to walk around with elevated red blood cells for a little bit.
Right.
So again, it's just one of those things you have to know. But there are definitely some problems that can go along with it. If you do have high blood pressure, for example, and you start noticing these things in bodybuilding, there's way too many kidney issues. There's a lot of people out there who have kidney issues. So you need to start, again, this is where you start connecting the dots. So renal issues are probably one of the big reasons that people will have high blood pressure, and then blood thickness feeds right into that. So you need to make sure that your kidneys are healthy. You need to make sure that you're fully hydrated too. Just simply being dehydrated, that's going to be one of the things that raises your blood thickness on the lab work. But yeah, I would say most commonly I see people that have actually high blood pressure that they don't know about. I would say that is probably one of the more common things. And if you do go donate blood, they're going to check your blood pressure. So at least here they do. So I don't know if I'm sure they probably do where you guys donate blood as well. So you're going to see your blood pressure. And if you are someone that has higher blood pressure, I would suggest getting a cuff of your own, because like getting your blood pressure checked by someone else, like it's a doctor or a nurse, can be kind of stressful. You get that white coat. I don't know what you call it. I call it the white coat syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So get your own cuff and you can check it on your own. But I don't see low blood counts a lot. It does happen mainly in people that have anemia of some kind.
Yep.
Actually, I don't want to say that it doesn't happen, because it does, actually, because I would say that it happens probably more in women than men typically, especially like excessive. Here's a good one for you. It's just to give you a little story. I had a girl the other day that she has really, and not to make it TMI, but I feel that it's relevant. She has really aggressive menstrual cycles.
Yep.
And when she went to get her blood work done, it was that time of the month, and she has lots of blood loss. Well, she was showing up anemic.
I was just about to mention this, is that ladies, pay attention to where you're at on your menstrual cycle, because it can skew these two values for sure. Because for iron levels, for sure. Yeah, keep going there. You got it.
Yep. So that's definitely for you gals, especially. You're gonna basically recycle a lot of this stuff, I guess you could say. You're gonna want to check and keep an eye on iron levels and B12 levels, or just B vitamin levels in general. You're going to have, there's another value here that I'll mention as well, just because it's kind of connected is you'll see on labs, you'll see an MCV, which is mean I see if I can even say it, corpuscular volume, and then you'll have your mean corpuscular hemoglobin, which is your MCH. Then you'll have your RDW as well, which is red cell distribution width. All these are essentially like the size of the different cells and the amount of like hemoglobin and stuff within the actual cell itself. You don't necessarily need to know this, but what you need to know is that typically high MCV is related to B vitamin deficiencies, specifically normally folate and B12, and then MCH is much in the same. If you're low, it can be iron deficiency. If you're high, it can be vitamin B12 deficiency. This goes unspotted on LabWork all the time. I get LabWork like this constantly, and I'll see just little deviations. And while that's not like inherently extremely dangerous, if you're walking around anemic or slightly anemic, you just generally have a little lower energy levels. And if you correct these things, which is really easy to correct, you're going to feel better. So you can go ahead.
I would say that, yeah, especially during let's say times of lower calories, like even like contest prep, whatever you want to call it, they start exhibiting signs of being anemic, of having the low iron, and that's something that, like you said, it's pretty damn easy to fix. Whether if you want to go straight up supplementation, or you just want to figure out more foods that you want to incorporate into your diet to bring the iron deficiency back up, along with the vitamin B12. The amount of ladies I know, especially of either competitors or not, just from talking to them at the gym, that have they're on both, either on the injectable B vitamin, or they're taking a B complex, or they're using some form of iron supplementation, was way more than I would have thought. And they say it's basically game changer. Like, as in, like you said, their energy levels, they for months, days, years, that they feel like junky all the time, and it's something that easy to catch. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it is. It's super easy to fix. I mean, there's iron. There's tons of iron supplements. A couple little things that you might want to watch out for is sometimes iron supplements can be a little hard on the stomach. You might see them advertised as gentle iron. That'll be could be like a time released, or could be like some kind of buffered coating or something that's going to allow it to release slowly within the GI tract. So that you might want to try that. B vitamins. Now this is an interesting one. I had this myself. Was typically, like, we consume a lot of B vitamins because most of us eat meat, right, or protein sources are pretty high in B vitamins, especially B12. So maybe that's why that's overlooked, is the fact that people think, well, I mean, I eat a lot of B12, which is normally true, but sometimes it's just an absorption issue. A lot of people will have some issues with absorption. And if you don't have any major GI issues that are causing like malabsorption of just nutrients in general, then it might be there's something called intrinsic factor that helps with B vitamin absorption and assimilation. And for whatever reason, and I personally don't know the exact reason, there might be a more in-depth science answer for it, but a lot of people will lack this intrinsic factor. So
yes,
so if you're getting a lot of B12 in your diet, for example, which most people are, or a lot of folate, I mentioned folate, you might need what they call an activated or methylated vitamin. A lot of the better, I see a lot of the better companies now they're providing these B vitamins that are already quote unquote activated. So they don't require like any conversion steps for your body to utilize them. Let's see, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. One that's probably available pretty widely would be Life Extension brand.
Yeah, I really like those guys a lot. Yeah, I think I use their ashwagandha, so they're, yeah.
And I think they're like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't really found many major countries like that I have clients in that they don't have retailers. So or have like online shippings to those countries. So you can probably get it pretty much anywhere. Their B complex is called, actually have it right here. It's called Bioactive Complete B complex. And that's just
perfect.
What it says on the front says contains enzymatically active B vitamins. So that's going to be what you want. That's all the vitamins are already in their active form. You do not need to assimilate them. So you're good to go. So yeah, back to your blood counts. If you are someone that is low in those blood counts, check out your iron levels, check out your B vitamin levels. You can get those checked. Like you can actually go in and just get your iron levels checked. Normally a lot of people will get what they call their ferritin level, which is, it's basically like how much iron is within the cells. And that'll tell you like, is your body storing enough iron? And then B vitamins are super easy because if you get those checked, those are water soluble. So You're going to see, there's going to be a lot of B vitamins in the blood, or I'm sorry, there will be a lot of B vitamins in the bloodstream and also in the urine. And so it's pretty easy to check those. Some of the more heavily fat soluble vitamins, they store in different tissues in the body. They're a little trickier to check, but I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, those are pretty much the heavy hitters on those. Like I said, though, I mean, if you do have things that are chronically off or they're very, very far out of range, follow up with your doctor, because there are definitely with your blood counts, there's some pulmonary issues, some kidney issues. I mean, and then with your white blood cells, I mean, there's some serious diseases that could be there present. It's just try not to freak out. Make sure you're just kind of connecting the dots.
For sure. And I would even say that to take a look at it from the other aspect too, is that don't ignore this stuff either. Because like I'll see I don't know, hypochondriacs or hyper is that they will see it's not as, it's a couple points off, or then they can even exaggerate more and say it's a couple 100 points off, or depending upon the scale that we're measuring, and that they're just ignoring these things time after time, even if it's from the doctor saying, hey, this is off, we have got to address this, and you either opt out of the medication, opt out of a dietary change, opt out of a correct supplemental advice. Is that don't do that either. Like I would say the hypochondriac is just as awful as we'll call it the hypochondriac. Try to be as objective as you can, and then to not go too far into this topic, but finding a physician that will work with you, right, is I will say instrumental. I know locally here that can be hell. Is finding someone that won't just give you a lecture on, let's say, if you're obese, and then before you know it, they're saying that's the only, that's all they want to talk to you. They want to talk down to you, be condescending, whereas that's not helping anything. And then also, too, if they find out you're a bodybuilder, regardless if you choose to enhance or not, they're going to be condescending about that as well. So it's like, it's finding someone, so where I'm going with that is you don't have to stick with just your family doctor. Seek out better options, because I know I did, and thank God that I did about a year and a half ago, and it's for all intents and purposes literally changed my life, because he was much more receptive to my blood work and much more receptive to my lifestyle. So whereas before that it was very confusing for not only myself, but then to get, we'll say, real medical correct advice. So that's something to be on the watch for, especially here in Canada, where you can get the tests done easier than like I said, paying for them in the States. Is that they can confuse you. And what I mean by that is I've had some doctors say they won't give you a copy of the blood work, which yes, they can give you either a printout or they can give you an email copy. Whereas some people say, well, we'll call you if something's off. Whereas no, you can say, I want to go over it. Have the physician go over it with you, or have a nurse go over it with you, because you want to see where your values are. Are they on the high end? Are they on the low end? Because you are entitled to that. Especially let alone in the U.S., and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you pay for this stuff, you are definitely entitled to having a follow-up, we'll say, consult.
Yeah, well, but you still, like you said, you still get a lot of the, they don't say anything unless it's off. The thing is, that's if they consider it off. So again, I love that you
said that. Exactly. If they consider it off.
we're looking at wide ranges on some of these things, like I said, and when we go into other stuff, like I'd say this is a lot more relevant to the hormone section, especially like the hormone ranges are ridiculously big, something like testosterone, for example. And we'll talk about this. Just because you're in range doesn't mean it's good, type of thing. But yeah, you can get your lab work done. I mean, I had that today. I had someone that got their labs back or they said, I haven't heard from my doctor yet. I'm assuming all my lab work's fine. I'm like, well, how about you like make sure you get a copy. Yeah. They've never had lab work done, so they don't know like how the whole ordeal works. But yeah, get a copy. And hell, if they don't want to take the time to go over it with you, there's a lot of knowledgeable people that can at least help you. And then guess what? Once you have that knowledge, take it to a new doctor.
You got it. Yep.
You are now equipped, and you can move on to somebody better. So,
just like the relationship advice, man, you are now equipped. Move on to somebody better. That's right. You got it.
I think that covers most of them. Like I said, I'm not going to go into all really go into all the monocytes and lymphocytes and things like that. If you are seeing serious deviations in your white blood cell counts in multiple categories, definitely follow up with the doctor, because there are some disease risks there.
For sure.
Now, moving on to, we can do CMP, which is your complete metabolic panel.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Right on. Now, on this one, you're going to see some of the markers that you guys are probably familiar with would be things like fasting glucose is on there. That's a lot of people are going to know that one. You'll typically see that. You'll typically see your electrolytes, so your potassium, sodium, chloride levels. You're going to see kidney markers like your BUN, creatinine. You're going to see your EGFR, which a lot of people probably are familiar with. A couple protein markers like albumin, globulins, bilirubin. So there are several things that you guys are probably going to know on here. Fasting glucose, I don't even know. I mean, do you want to go over that? I feel like that insulin sensitivity is like a different episode.
Yeah, we can just basically say that. It's that like if it's off, obviously, we'll have another podcast for you guys to tell you kind of what to do about it. But yeah, it's insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance is a whole other topic that we will obviously be talking about. Just know that if you're consistently out of range in the lower end or the higher end, that something does need to be done, and we will go over that later.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Now, when you're looking at your electrolytes, there are, again, a lot of these things will tie into one another, just like on the CBC chart. A lot of this, you're going to be looking at your, usually looking at like kidney issues, for example, when you're seeing electrolytes that are really, really skewed, or your BUN and creatinine levels that are really, really skewed. So your electrolytes, you guys know what those are. I mean, it's literally just the content of that mineral or that electrolyte in your bloodstream. So the amount of sodium that's in your blood, or the amount of potassium that's in your blood. Now, if you do see major deviations in terms of these levels, like for example, high potassium, that's very dangerous. It's definitely not something that you want to mess around with. You can be looking at some major cardiac issues, even major kidney failure, for example. So these things, though, like I said, you're probably going to know beforehand, like there's something going on before you start seeing these really major skewed values. Now, to us as bodybuilders, this is one that I don't know that I've ever heard anyone mention it. Maybe they have, but I brought this up on a couple boards. As I see, sometimes you'll see people with electrolytes that are kind of skewed, mainly sodium and potassium. Like they have the most common one I see is higher potassium levels than sodium. Like the ratio of the two is off. And what actually happens here a lot of the time for us, and I feel this is super relevant, is we'll have our aldosterone levels can actually be skewed by dysfunctioning adrenal glands. So what happens is our adrenal glands are, if they're really beat up, for example, like we're really overreached or overtrained, and we're having what you might call, I guess I'll just say adrenal fatigue. I guess.
Ooh, how dare you say that? Yep.
Well, I like to call it adrenal insufficiency, where you have, that's more so like when your adrenals are tanked, like they have been beat up so bad that they can't even produce enough cortisol and hormones to keep up with the stress demand. So now your adrenals are pretty much in the tank, and you might start seeing these potassium levels that are skewed. So I've actually been able to, it's kind of cool because my doc taught me this one time, and he showed this to me. I had no clue. Like I thought electrolytes, really? And then he said, no, look at your potassium level. He goes, look at your adrenal values, look at your potassium level. And now every time I look at my lab work, I'll go back and check my white blood cells, and I'll also check something like my potassium levels, and in correlation with how I feel, and I can almost point out overtraining with that.
Okay, and how do you see that? Do you see like the potassium or electrolytes are high along with white blood cells being high, or what's the correlation there?
Yeah, normally white blood cells will be high, or they'll be very low depending on how beat up you are. Because again, it's like the idea of your body's going to essentially keep up with the demand, but only for so long.
Right.
And then you're going to be burnt, I guess you could say just burnt out. Now with your potassium, typically people with potassium levels that are more elevated, you're going to be looking at adrenal, basically like adrenal dysfunction. Your adrenals are very beat up, and you could have, there are some actual diseases that are associated with this. So if anyone's heard of Addison's disease or Cushing's, which is Addison's is an adrenal disease, and Cushing's is as well. Both of these are extreme. They're not very common, but Cushing's is actually just like extremely elevated, uncontrollably elevated cortisol, whereas Addison's is bottomed out cortisol. So your Addison's would be kind of like the adrenal insufficiency. That would be more on that realm. And the Cushing's is going to be your, hyper adrenal function. So elevated sodium would be Cushing's, and elevated potassium would be Addison's. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you have these diseases, because there is oftentimes there's like an autoimmune component to these diseases, perhaps, so you don't have to necessarily have the disease, but what it could tell you if your electrolytes are skewed, assuming there's not a kidney issue, is that your adrenal glands are taxed. So I guess that's probably, start looking at how you feel. You can go back and look at those white blood cells, like I said, and you might even be able to find something in there. It's kind of a cool little we'll call it a LabWork hack.
Sure.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Going down, you're probably another one. Bun and creatinine levels. Everyone asks about these because they are off like chronically all the time.
That's right.
And, so this is another one. It's you don't necessarily need to freak out. This is one of those two where I said be hydrated, because any marker that has to do with your kidneys is, I would say, at least 9, maybe 8 times out of 10, probably 9 times out of 10 is related to just being dehydrated for lab work.
Really? That high? Okay. Wow. That's really good info. Yep. So drink your damn water before you go, for sure.
Yeah. Most of the time. Now I'm going to exclude people that are like chronically abusing, like oral PEDs or something, or some certain types of drugs that really beat up your kidneys. Like those people, obviously, if I see their levels are elevated, I'm probably going to think differently.
Yeah, for sure.
But in general, most of us that are weight training and have like maybe some inflammation from weight training, or are slightly dehydrated when they go in and get lab work, yep, I see bun and creatinine levels off on, I'd say probably more than half.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, but it's normally not by a lot. Normally, like your bun levels will be like 1 point.
Okay.
Will be like, like for example, here in the States, we're using milligrams per deciliter. I think on my last lab work, my bun was a 21, and the range goes up to 20.
Right.
And my creatinine was fine, and my EGFR, which I'll talk about, it was also fine. So, and my bun's almost always like right around that range. Again, just a hydration thing. I go really early and get the lab work done. I'm trying to get my water in. So, now if they are off, you may have that's not to say that you can't have kidney issues. So again, now we go back to connect dots like we have on some of the other things. If you are somebody that has high blood pressure, you need to watch your kidney values, because that is hard on your kidneys. Anything that's messing with water distribution and water balance and electrolyte balance, if you have high blood pressure, they call it the silent killer for a reason. It does damage. Yeah. It does damage your kidneys. It's definitely damage to like blood vessels. It's not something you can feel, unless your blood pressure is like, we're talking like 200 over 100, where you're like a lobster and you feel like you're you're gonna feel like shit with that. But I mean, if your blood pressure's 160 over, I'm even giving you 160 over 100, you might not even feel that.
That's right.
And that's elevated enough to where if you're walking around with that for 5 years,
that's concerning.
10 years,
that's concerning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely is. Absolutely. That's 20, that's 20 points out of range. Or whatever range, depending on the range. But yeah, you're definitely going to want to start looking at those kidney values, and you're going to want to start putting the pieces together there. So bun and creatinine, they're essentially just waste. All they are is really just metabolic waste products. That's why they're really easy to check on LabWork, because they're gonna excrete. You might even see bun and creatinine ratio. I truthfully, I hardly even look at the ratio of the two, because if one's a little off, the ratio is going to be pretty much shit. So I wouldn't.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really focus on that a whole lot. On the CMP also, I'd say protein. I mentioned protein levels. I don't see issues with protein levels a whole lot unless somebody has kidney issues. So if they have kidney issues, or they're really dehydrated, again, as you notice, the theme here is on your CMP. If you're dehydrated, it's all going to suck.
Right. I will interject here and say that there is way too much stuff out there still about saying that high protein levels will wreck your kidneys. No. Every single time where it's come back where your kidneys are even remotely healthy, that is just a big bunch of shit. It just doesn't pan out. So, but now if you have a pre-existing kidney problem, that's when to maybe start paying attention to this stuff in terms of like the protein levels that you consume through your diet. But outside of that, I don't even like. Do you still find that still floating around out there that high protein is going to kill your kidneys?
Well, maybe not as much in our community, but I guarantee somebody's physician will tell them that.
Oh, see, and that's hilarious. That's still out there. Like it's like I don't even know. Like I've seen absurd levels of protein, like 600 grams of protein that was on some of these studies that they've done, and it comes back with nothing. It basically gives your kidneys more of a job, especially if they are healthy. It's like if you have enough water. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that quickly that don't worry at all about, oh my gosh, this protein gonna be destroying my kidneys. No, you have to have a pre-existing condition. I think I don't want to say 100% of the time, but we'll go with 99% of the time will be the only reason to ever show concern about dietary protein levels.
Yeah, you're right. They might recommend that you go on a lower protein diet or something like that, which it could be an issue if you have pre-existing condition, like you said. But what's hilarious about that, and also very alarming, is that we know things that your doctors don't know, which is bad. So again, be educated. Kidneys is another one, especially those bun and creatinine levels that I do see a lot, where people go in and so be forewarned, if you go in dehydrated and those levels are all jacked up, you're probably going to get a lecture, and they're probably going to want to run more tests, and you're probably going to freak out. I, no joke, had a client get sent to the emergency room directly from the physician's office.
Wow.
In an ambulance, because they said that their kidneys were going to fail. This is obviously extreme, but this is not made up. I kid you not. They did this, and my client had no idea. They had no idea, but they had gotten their lab work done. They were very, very dehydrated on the lab work.
Right.
Like, chronically dehydrated. So their kidney values were, and they already kind of had mildly high blood pressure as well. So they were kind of always battled with those values. So of course, when they went in, they looked horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
And they went in, they hydrated the person via IV, electrolytes, all that stuff. All the values came back normal about 6 hours later.
Right. That quick, 6 hours, yeah. But so that's I love that example. That's just how much water, like you've been saying, is the whole theme here, can affect every single one of these values on your CMP.
And yeah, you can get, if you're concerned about it too, outside of the things we mentioned for fasting, you can go and do this in the afternoon after you drink water all day. I think people think that you have to have blood work fasted. I'm like, no, if your kidney values are skewed, I'm like, why don't you go after you get off work in the evening, make an appointment and go get the labs drawn. I guarantee that not guarantee, but chances are your values are going to look a lot better after you've been drinking water all day long.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah. So last one, probably worth mentioning for sure, would be the EGFR, which is basically blood filtration in the kidneys. Now, this is a tricky one because you want high EGFR. High EGFR is good. Low EGFR is typically bad. Here we use the value like 60 mLs or above is typically good. Again, if you're dehydrated, it's going to be skewed. It's going to be hard to get an accurate measure. If you do have several of these kidney markers that are off, then I would definitely suggest going back and rechecking at a time where you're pretty thoroughly hydrated. So that's probably pretty much, that's the most ones for, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. That's perfect. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't mention, and I know we already talked about liver enzymes as well.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah, and we can touch on here. So we'll touch on some values for cardiovascular health. Now,
sure.
Cardiovascular health there's a lot of things that can really feed into cardiovascular health, and also to your health of your other organs, not just your heart, but things like insulin resistance, for example. There are studies showing that chronically high insulin levels, what they would call insulinemia or hyperinsulinemia, would be bad for cardiovascular health. Mm-hmm. How many people do you know have ever got that really go in and get their fasting insulin levels checked? Not blood glucose, insulin.
Oh, very rare. Yeah, if ever.
Yeah. So there's things that you can, like, in some of this stuff too, and there's other things that I'm not even going to mention too, like CRP levels, inflammatory marker. You can, if you want to get these things checked, I think it's a good idea. Like, I think it's worth doing occasionally. I don't think you have to necessarily, unless you're somebody that obviously has like a history of it. I would probably go in and get, especially if you're noticing other markers are off, I would probably go in and get your fasted insulin levels checked. I would go in and get your CRP levels checked, which is C-reactive protein. I would also probably go in and get your, another one would be homocysteine levels checked. And those are probably three biggies that I don't see checked very often. the homocysteine levels, and just to brief you guys on those, homocysteine levels can be pretty much corrected through, it's an amino acid, and it's usually elevated in people that have vitamin B deficiencies.
Okay.
Literally can be corrected that easily in most people. Most people can literally supplement with like one of the bioactive B complexes that we mentioned, and you're going to correct that homocysteine 9 times out of 10. So
great.
And that's assuming, and guys, all this cardiovascular stuff, that's assuming that you're not doing anything that's deleterious to your health. Like you don't have chronic high blood pressure, you don't smoke, you're not an alcoholic. Like, you know what I mean? I guess that's everyone I would assume would know those things, hopefully.
Less than you'd think, unfortunately, which is I'm glad you said it, because yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that we're saying this assuming that you already are doing those things. So CRP levels, that's a protein released by your liver. It basically will show whole body inflammation. So it's not going to show. It's not extremely specific, though. You can get the what they call a high sensitivity. A lot of them, they'll see the CRP high sensitivity is what they call it, and that will typically I won't say typically, but it could lend itself towards inflammation within the vessels. So you might, again, connecting the dots. If you're seeing high CRP levels for inflammation, and you're seeing maybe a high homocysteine, or your triglycerides are messed up, or if you start seeing all these things connected, I would start seriously considering, for one, correcting them, and secondly, possibly, especially depending on how old you are, like some imaging or something for your heart. If you're getting in that 40 and over crowd, especially getting some. I mean, there's a lot of options now, like ultrasounds, coronary CTs. There's a lot of things that they can do to actually look in the arteries, to actually look at the heart, like look at like your left ventricle hypertrophy, for example, to see what your ventricles look like. So get those things checked. So homocysteine, CRP. What was the other one I said? I thought there was another. Oh, the insulin levels. Insulin levels, you can get fasted insulin levels checked. There's other things that can skew that too. Like if you're eating a ton and you're insulin resistant, you have chronically high blood sugar, you may have hyperinsulinemia because your pancreas is pumping out a shitload of insulin to try to keep up with the blood sugar. So, again, connect the dots. You guys can start figuring out the mechanisms and see how these things are interconnected. Now, probably the main markers that most people are going to look at are your lipid levels, so HDL, LDL, and triglycerides. Those are probably going to be your biggies that most people are going to look at. Now, I'll go as far as to say they're definitely not the tell-all. I encourage people to check these other things, and I encourage people to look at everything, even like something like a particle size. How familiar are you? I'm sure you're familiar with. I think we talked about it, like particle sizes, lipid particle size.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you guys are getting your HDL and LDL checked, take this stuff with a grain of salt, and I'll mention the particle size so you know what that refers to. But HDL is quote unquote your good cholesterol. LDL is typically what they call your bad cholesterol. While that's not necessarily true, that's typically how it's classified. But HDL is something we typically want to see higher, and LDL is typically something we don't want to see super high. But this is where it gets a little tricky. Now, I'm not going to go into people that are, if you're using performance enhancing drugs, then one of the very first things that they'll do in terms of side effects is they typically skew your lipid levels. Yep. So right there, you want some kind of baseline that you know what you're like when you're using them. And so you can kind of see the difference, and you can also see that you're returning normal once you stop. So what we're looking at, so the main things I'm looking at here are HDL levels. I'd like to see them a little bit higher. However, there is a genetic component to this. Some people genetically have kind of some funky lipid profiles, like they'll have funky looking LDLs are a little high, or LDLs are normal, but HDLs a little low. You know, they might have some things that while they aren't using any kind of drugs, or they don't have any prescriptions, and they don't have any other health issues, they might still have some weird looking lipids. Now, this is measuring blood lipids, so it's measuring essentially like what's in your blood, what's circulating.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with this is that this does not measure what has oxidized and stuck to the vessels, and that's what we're or the arterial walls, like those are the things that are obviously going to cause like blockages, the things that they get hard and they stick, and then they eventually gunk up the arterial walls, and you can't get your blood through, and then you have a stroke. That's yeah. So that's where, if you are somebody that chronically has these lipid, like what you would call dyslipidemia, where that's just basically, that just means lipids are off, I would definitely get a particle size done. I have no idea if you guys can even get it done. That'd be cool if you could. I know we can hear I've never even heard of a doctor ordering it, but you can order it off of the private lab.
Okay, cool. Yep.
Do they have it in Canada?
I would have to take a look into that, because I haven't had it done myself, or had anyone I know have had it done. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to have to look into.
I just got curious about it because I had that, like almost everyone in my family has. So we don't even really have a history of of heart disease, but we did have a history of almost all my family members had low HDL levels. Which,
no way, got it.
To me, I was like, oh, that's interesting, and I was researching it, and I found out and talking to the doctor, and he said, yeah, there's a genetic component. Let's get your particle size checks. So what the particle size does, guys, is it'll show the size of the lipid particle. It'll show the larger particles are typically what we want. They call them the large fluffy particles. They float around in your blood. They don't cause any harm. They are doing what they should be. They're contributing to, hormone production and all the good stuff that they do. They aren't harmful. We do not want the small oxidized particles, small hard particles. Those are the ones that get sticky and they stick to the walls.
Yes.
That is what the lipo profile, that's what we call it here. It's called an NMR lipo profile typically, and that is what that will show you. Now, it does not show you what is stuck to the walls, but it'll show you how many of the particles are small, hard and dense, and how many of the particles are large and fluffy.
Right.
And yeah, and it can obviously, like if you are in the upper 75th percentile, or you're almost all large particles, you're probably pretty good. Now, if you notice that you're getting an NMR done and you have a lot of hard, small, dense particles, you might be somebody that really wants to consider looking into some imaging and have your vessels checked out and make sure that you don't have any blockages.
Yeah, nothing's getting stuck. They're not collecting there. That's right.
Yep. Because they can do a lot of stuff. It gets really not put stents in and stuff, and they can do that shit like clockwork now in people. So it's really not hard to catch and hard to correct. So again, if you're seeing some of these markers that are skewed and you're concerned about it, definitely go in and get the imaging done, especially if you're older. Don't get me wrong, like you can have a stroke if you're 25, like it could still happen. It's just, it typically takes some time to accumulate some of these blockages and stuff. So
That's right.
Yeah. So, now as far as like actually correcting that, this is, man, I don't even know that I could go through this whole thing in an episode, because I have posted about this a million times and had done videos about it, and the whole idea of the whole medical model of like lowering cholesterol is so whack. It's so
Those are the statin drugs, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that,
man?
You guys have one?
Oh yeah. Prescribed? They're just so damn hard on the friggin' body. Like, yeah.
Yep. They are. They have. And see, the thing about it that's sad too is there are studies like if you dig really deep, you can find the literature that shows like the problems that they have, that they cause, but they just don't have a lot of benefits. Like the success rate of them of actually helping people and causing like stopping coronary events in people just not very good.
It's not there. Yep.
Oh, it just sucks, and it's not there. And then they cause other issues. Like they basically make a lot of people very weak over time. They can cause diabetes through skewing blood sugar levels. They can cause just generally make people feel weak and crappy. They can, and the thing is, just the idea of actually bottoming out cholesterol in general is just not even right, even if they didn't cause side effects, because that in and of itself is problematic. Cholesterol is like one of the most beneficial molecules in our body to produce hormones. It's just, again, you want to have the right particles. You don't want to have the problematic ones. You want to have the ones that are harmless, that are floating around doing their jobs. So, yeah, if you're someone on statin drugs too, I would highly suggest going and getting, seeing if you can get an NMR done or whatever it's called in your country, and see if you can check that out. Statin drugs are dangerous. I'm not gonna we're not doctors. We're not gonna tell you to stop taking your meds.
No, that's right. It's just, like I know you said there was lots that you could say on it in terms of how to be able to adjust the levels, but just know that statins are like, I don't even want to say a last resort. But yes, of course, don't stop them. But it's if you can do something to potentially get yourself off of them, do it. I would, for sure.
I think probably the couple easiest things: control insulin resistance. That's one of them. Control inflammation. Eat some healthy fats in your diet, whether that's like have a good ratio of lower inflammatory fats versus your inflammatory. Like we eat a lot of meat that has a lot of omega-6s. They're inflammatory.
That's right.
So try to get some quality sources. If you're going to eat fattier meat, get stuff like grass-fed meat that might have a better fat profile, pastured eggs, take your omega-3 supplements, use oils that don't oxidize easily. So any oil that has a high smoke point, that's a good one. If you guys cook with oils like olive oil and stuff, don't burn the shit out of it in the pan, because all that stuff, like if you're seeing it smoking like crazy, you're oxidizing all those fats before you even eat them.
You got it.
So there's some stuff you can do. I don't know. I might have made a video about it. I'll have to maybe link it up, and when we post this.
Yeah, sure. Just send it to me before for sure. That'd be great. Because like there will be people for sure. Like this is I can't thank you enough for going over all this stuff, because you know a heck of a lot more than me about it, and it was great. So this is I would say not only an intro, but like an intermediate level study of the CMP and the CBC stuff for sure. But then if people will want to know more, right? So if you've got extra stuff out there, Austin, that you've done on this before, which I know you do, then yeah, we'll just link it so everyone else that's just as interested as us can dive into it too.
Yeah, and we can do another. Maybe on our next Q&A too, we could, if everyone has follow-ups, we can always.
Oh, for sure. That's a great idea. Yep. Look at you go. Cool. All these damn good ideas. Damn, that's awesome.
Yeah, straight from Austin's ass.
From Austin's ass, right there, baby. There you go. Yep.
All right.
I think that's great. I don't know if because we're a little bit over an hour here. I think that was awesome. We'll be able to tie into the second part there when we go into the hormones with a Z. So
yes,
hormones. So, but yeah, I guess then from mostly Austin's, a little bit of me today, which was great. I loved it. I was able to listen and learn too. This is great for me. But yeah, so from Austin and Marty here at Mind Body Broadcast, we will catch you next time.